Hello, welcome to my biology class, and thank you for exploring life with me. Pandas, Aulurofulgens are well adapted to life in their home in the mountainous forests of Asia. They have cinnamon, red, and white coats. The coat colors enable them to camouflage themselves among the red mosses and white lichens in their home environment. Their long bushy tail, which they can wrap around their body like a blanket, provides warmth for them during the winter. From their wrist, there's a bony projection with which they can grasp their food, the bamboo. I personally enjoy watching the red panda at the Houston Zoo. Giant pandas also live in similar regions in Asia, and they also eat the bamboo. The question is, are they closely related to the red pandas? Scientists once thought so, but scientists have since reclassified the red pandas into their own family based on molecular biology and DNA sequences that is now available. Despite their distinct lineages, however, the two, the red panda and the giant panda, have something in common. They are both at the risk of extinction. So their populations are extremely reduced in the wild due to destruction of their habitats and the vast reduction in the bamboo, the food that they feed upon. So this is your true friend, Olufisayo, the red panda. So you've got the cinnamon red all over, got that cute cat-like eyes and the white splashes, and it can blend in its environment. We don't see that extra finger here. Anyway, continuing the big ideas of this chapter, we explore biology, which is the scientific study of life. Important to this scientific study of life is an understanding of the process of science. So we take a quick look so that we can understand that process of science. And then we discuss the unifying themes, the 5 unifying themes that we find in biology in spite of the diversity in organisms and the populations of populations. There are 5 unifying themes in biology. So biology is the scientific study of life. So when biology is defined, you simply say biology is the scientific study of life. So what is life? It's a whole lot easier to define biology than it is to define life itself. So, but we define life using those traits, those properties, those characteristics that are common to all living things, that allows a 5-year-old to be able to say, oh, this thing is alive, that one is not living. So these properties of life that collectively define a living thing include order, reproduction, growth and development, energy processing, regulation, response to the environment, and evolutionary adaptation. The cell is the structural and functional unit of life. So it's the simplest form of life that can exhibit all of these traits, all of these properties of life. So there are single cell organisms that they have order, they have their internal organization. They reproduce their young ones. Some of them just grow to their maximum size, divide by asexual reproduction, and then 2 new ones are born. Those 2 now will go through growth and development to maturity, where they can divide again and produce their offsprings. All of life on Earth is only possible because there is energy to sustain life from the sunlight. So the main source of energy in our planet is the sun. The organisms that are photosynthetic, or the autotrophs, they harvest the energy of the sunlight and they process it in their bodies for biological work. They also share, maybe albeit not willingly, the products of their energy harvesting by photosynthesis with other living organisms, the consumers that feed on them or feed on other consumers. Through feeding, energy conversion takes place. So our bodies, the bodies of all living organisms, are always processing energy, either through storage during the process of photosynthesis or eating other organisms, and through utilization during the process of cellular respiration. The regulation of different of the body environment to maintain homeostasis, for instance, living humans, we have an internal mechanism for regulating our body temperature. So when we have a fever and our body temperatures goes out of normal, you know that that person is probably sick. Living organisms respond to changes in their environment. That's very, very important that we can respond, and we also undergo evolutionary adaptation. We have to adapt to our environment in order to be able to survive and not dehydrate to death or killed or whatever. The cell, remember, is a structural and functional unit of life. So this is illustrating the characteristics of living things. There is order. Typically, the structure, the careful organization or ordering of the parts of an organism, they're very, very important for the functions and consequently for the survival of that organism. Living organisms do not live forever. We live for so long, and then some live for 50 years, some live for 150 years, like the turtles, but some live 100 years, some 50 or 40. In order to perpetuate the species, there's reproduction. So living things give birth to their young ones so that they can have future generations. Living things also grow. So this elephant baby, I just love Houston Zoo, so because I see baby elephants. So it will eventually grow to an adult like this one and have its own organism, its own offsprings. So this is growth and reproduction. We go through growth, become an adult. We go through development. I'm sorry, and develop. So very, very essential. We respond to our environment. So when food is cooking, you're coming home in the driveway and you can smell something, then your stomach, your mouth waters, your stomach grumbles because you're looking forward to eating that food. Likewise, this Venus flytrap senses the fly hovering above it. It closes, it clasps, and traps the fly, and releases enzymes to digest the fly so that it can harvest the nutrients and use the chemical nutrients that were logged in the insect for its own growth. So this is an example of a carnivorous animal eating plants. So only a few animals actually, animals eat plants, but there are a few plants that will eat the animals as well. The autotrophs, the green photosynthetic organisms, they can tap energy of the sunlight by the process of photosynthesis, and they are the primary producers on our planet. They harvest that energy, and we, just like this larva, would tap into that energy that has been locked up now in glucose molecules and use it as food for building body parts, for walking. And that energy is also converted to heat energy and in our body. So there's energy processing always going on. There's the harvesting of energy from the sun by photosynthesis. There's a cellular respiration inside the cells to release that energy, convert that energy into the molecular form that living cells can use to do biological work. Living organisms regulate different things. We as humans, we have a mechanism inside us where different organ systems work together to help us regulate our body temperature. The lizard and the reptiles do not. So they have to come up for sun in the morning to elevate their body temperature so they don't freeze to death. There's also evolutionary adaptation. We discussed the red panda's adaptation of the color to be able to to mimic its environment so that it's difficult for it to be preyed upon, and the long tail to keep warm in the cold. And those are examples of we adapt different to different environment differently for survival. So your checkpoint questions, as you go along, answer them, and you will be able to email it to me or complete it on your quiz page. So checkpoint question, how would you define life? So send that to me, that's through the quiz site or by email. Taxonomy is the study that deals with the naming and classification of organisms. And the biologists that name species and classify them into broader groups is called a taxonomist. So although we continue to debate the classification of organisms, at the higher level, there is a general consensus amongst biologists that all of life can be organized into 3 higher levels called domains. The domain bacteria, the domain archaea, the domain eukarya. Eu means true, carry on of the nucleus. So eukarya, they are those organisms that have true nucleus, and bacteria and archaea are relatively simple cells. Archaea are unique in the sense that these are probably the only organisms that can strive, survive, and carry on all of those wonderful traits of life in an extreme environment, such as a supersaline environment or extremely hot environment. So members of the eukarya include the fungi, plantae, and animalia. So this chart just shows you representatives of the bacteria. Most of them are microscopic, very simple, small cells. This has been magnified 7,500 times for you to be able to see. This archaea has been magnified 10,000 times. So bacteria, archaea, domain bacteria, domain archaea, domain eukarya, such diverse and easy to see with unaided eye. So we have a lot of examples that we can photograph. It doesn't mean that they were more numerous in populations, just easier to see. And so this does not need a higher magnification. The protists, members of the eukarya, some of them are single cell organisms, and so they still are observed with the help of the microscope. And these horn plants, the fungi, this is a fruiting body. Majority of the cells of this organism are actually hyphae that are ramifying like threads under the earth, under the trees, and every now and then when they reproduce the fruit and their fruiting bodies come up, they release their pores back to the earth to again begin to grow and form those thread-like hyphae that ramifies through the earth. Why are they good? They are important decomposers in the earth's forest underground. They are always busy helping us to return minerals to the earth. And this butterfly is a member of Animalia. And so those are the eukarya. They have true nucleus. That's what eukarya means. And examples, protists, Animalia, fungi, and plantae. So to which of the three domains of life do we belong? I'm looking forward to receiving your email of checkpoint questions, or you can also do it on the quiz page. In life's hierarchy of organization, new properties emerge at every level. So we have new properties emerge in the life's biological hierarchy. So biology study life across a broad range of scales. We study life at the molecular level. For example, the only reason we are able to identify this virus that's killing like crazy, this pandemic, the cause of this pandemic, the COVID-19, is because biologists have developed molecular biology skills to sequence the RNA, and so they do RT-PCR to actually to identify this virus. Biologists have divided the scope of biology from the molecular level to the planet into a series of structural levels. And as you go in the ascending order, hierarchically, you have emerging properties that result from the specific arrangement and interactions amongst these component parts. So this is the biosphere. So the biosphere encompasses all the ecosystems on Earth, the terrestrial, the aquatic, all of the aerial environments, all of life, all of the ecosystems on Earth are included in the biosphere. Our biosphere is the only one that we know in the Milky Way galaxy that supports life. So the word bio of life, that's basically the ball of life is essentially what we have. An ecosystem includes the living organisms and the environment in which they live. And that's why if we look at the oceans or the water bodies on the earth, we call them aquatic ecosystem. It includes all of the living organisms inside it and the water body itself. In the terrestrial ecosystem, then we have the land and the organisms that live on land, and so on and so forth. And the aerial above ground, so we have these systems. Then we have the community. So we have the community. So all of the plants and animal species in the forest or in that environment, they constitute the community. All of the living organisms together constitute the community. So that is in a community. Populations, we have the human population. The school of fish that we see in here, those are populations. So you have population, all of the same kind of organism together, they form a population. So they make up a population. So, and a single fish is one organism. The human population, amongst the human population, I am one organism. Inside this organism, there are organs and organ system. So this is the nervous system with the brain, and it connects all the way. There's innervation of all of the body parts. So, and then the tissue include a collection of cells that are together to perform specific functions. And then the cell is a structural and functional unit of life. This is a nerve cell. It's especially large compared with other cells, so that because it has to go from the central nervous system and be able to extend, even though a single cell long, further into different parts of the body for innervation, for the body to be able to sense, for the nervous system to be able to sense what's going on. Inside the cell, there are organelles. So the organelle example would be nucleus and other functional organelles. These organelles, they are made from molecules. So, and we have gone through that in descending order. If we go in ascending order, so two or more atoms combine together to form a molecule. The molecules in the cell combine together. For example, the DNA molecule wound with protein molecules in the cell from the cell's nucleus, making a eukarya what it is. The nucleus and other organelles are surrounded by a biological membrane to make a whole functioning cell. And a collection of cells specialized for a specific function forms the tissue. And this is nervous tissue. And inside an organism, they form organs such as the brain, an organ system such as the nerve cells that goes through, so the complete system. In humans, we have the digestive system, the reproductive system, the circulatory system, and so on and so forth, and in the fish. So the whole organism have several systems working together with internally and then with other body organ systems in the body for the cell to be able to function. This fish, for instance, have scales, part of its integumentary system that doesn't allow water to just soak in and blow up the fish. The organisms of the same kind form a population. And populations of living organisms, including plants, animals, etc., form the community. And the community of living organisms with their non-living environment becomes the ecosystem. And all of the various ecosystems combined are members of the biosphere. So checkpoint question. Which of these levels of biological organization includes all of the others in the list? Cell, molecule, organ, or tissue? Again, email me after you've gone through these presentations, your answers, or input it on the quiz. Now we look at the process of science. The process of science provides that opportunity to consistently study science in the same way. Science is a way of knowing, and the scientific process is a technical approach to understanding our natural world. So science uses evidence-based process of inquiry to investigate our natural world. So in the scientific process, you make observations. You and I practice science every day. We're not conscious of that, and we don't call it that. So when a scientist makes observations, based on those observations, the scientist formulates an hypothesis and makes predictions. And to test the hypothesis, scientists will conduct experiments, or they would make additional observations, and the data that they collect will be analyzed. It can lead to new hypotheses. It can lead to a retesting of the original hypothesis. It can lead to the formulation of new predictions and testing over. So the scientific process is non-linear. After an hypothesis has been tested over and over again and supported by a large body of evidence, it becomes a scientific theory. So the scientific theory is broad in scope and is supported by a large body of evidence. If over several years and several decades, the scientific theory continued to be supported, then it could become a scientific law. So in this experiment on this slide, we kind of explore how the scientific process works. So and this is one example of how you use the scientific process at home, and you just don't call it that. So you came home, the powers are out, and you look for your flashlight, and you found it, but it doesn't work. So you think, I wonder what's wrong. Maybe the batteries are dead. That is hypothesis 1. Why doesn't the flashlight work? Hypothesis 2, the bulbs is burnt out. So how would you test the hypothesis? You test the hypothesis 1 by replacing the batteries. You test the hypothesis 2 by replacing the bulb. Now, you test the predictions after replacing the batteries. You test the predictions by switching on the switch. And in this particular experiment, in hypothesis 1, the testers hypothesized that batteries are dead. In hypothesis 1, the team 2 with hypothesis 2 hypothesized that the bulb is burnt out. So team 1 predicted that replacing batteries will fix the problem. Team 2 predicted that replacing bulb will fix the problem based on their hypothesis. To test the hypothesis, the batteries were replaced in one team, the bulb replaced in the other. The results, the flashlight didn't work. So the hypothesis here is contradicted or falsified. Here it works, the hypothesis is supported. So one person comes into their house and they find a flashlight. They're going through their mind. They came up with 2 hypotheses, tested both of them, and that is a simple illustration of the scientific process. So what is the main requirement for a scientific hypothesis? Again, send the one list for this chapter of your answers to the checkpoint questions. So hypotheses can be tested using controlled experiments. So in an experimental test of a hypothesis, researchers will manipulate one component in a system and they would observe the effects on the other. For example, I might want to do a seed germination experiment in which I put, and my hypothesis is plants need water to germinate. So I have soil in 2 pots, and I will put a seed in one pot and the seed in another pot. I leave the one pot dry and I add water to the next pot, and I wait and watch them grow over the week. And if in 1 week, the one with the water germinates and the other doesn't, and I wait another 1 week, then I have tested my controlled experiment. The factor that is manipulated is called the independent variable. In our seed germination case, that is water. The measure used to judge the outcome of the experiment is called the dependent variable. In our case, in the case I just described, the dependent variable is germination. This variable depends on the manipulated variable. So if you don't add water, you don't have germination. So the experiment is controlled. So a controlled experiment compares an experimental group with control. Your control didn't have water, the experimental group had the water added to it. So the use of control and experimental groups can demonstrate the effect of a single variable. So in the experiment that we're going to look at on the next page, researchers found that mice models that did not match their habitat, they were not very, very well successful in their mimicry of their habitat, they had a higher predation rate than the camouflaged models because it's easier for the predators to see them and prey upon them. So this hypothesis can be tested in humans with clinical trials as well as retrospective and prospective observational studies. So I will go forward with the camouflage experiment, then I will discuss retrospective and prospective observations. So in a group of students with their professors wanted to test the hypothesis. They wanted to see if mice models that did not match their habitat would have a higher predation rate than camouflaged models. So they noticed that in the beach population mice, they have a light white coat, and the inland population mice have brown coats. So they put an equal amount of white coat and brown coat fake mice on the beach. Also inland, they put the same amount of white coat and brown coat fake mice in the inland environment and observed the number of times that predators tried to attack them. So on the beach, for the mice that were not that were camouflaged, that have their skin matching that of the surroundings, on the beach there were 2 attacks. For the non-camouflaged, there were 5, which means 71% of the non-camouflaged models were attacked. Inland, similar results, 5 attacks on the camouflaged models, 16 attacks on the non-camouflaged, against 76%. So there's more than 70% in each case frequency of attack for non-camouflaged models than there is for camouflaged models. So the hypothesis that mice models that did not match their habitat at a higher predation rate has been supported. Hypothesis can also be tested in humans with trials. Like right now, we have this COVID-19 pandemic. We know that vaccines are being developed and they are going through clinical trials that's testing whether the vaccines will be effective in preventing the COVID infection in people. Clinical trials can be in addition, scientists can have hypotheses tested using retrospective and prospective observational studies. In retrospective observational studies, we look at past experiences. For instance, we want to understand the demographics, the age where a certain type of cancer is more prevalent, or the sex type of people that have certain, or the race of people that have certain kind of cancer. So we will get data of all the cancer patients, and then we would identify them, group them according to their age. There we have the result will be a retrospective observational study giving us data on the demographics of that particular cancer. A prospective study is one that you are looking into the future. So we wanted to see what would the effect of this vaccine be on 0 to 5 year old. And it's a new vaccine. We're only going to start testing it from next month onwards into the future. Then, and we will be making observations as we go. Then that will be prospective observational study. So the checkpoint question, again, remember to answer all of the 14 checkpoint questions and email to me or complete on the quiz page. In some studies, researchers try to match factors such as sex, age, and general health for subjects in the control and experimental groups. What is this experimental design trying to do? So again, answer that and let us know. Hypotheses can be tested using observational data. So we don't only use experimental data, but we can use observational. For example, scientists tested the hypothesis about the evolutionary relationship of the red pandas. Initially, they looked at the physical similarities that are there between the red pandas and the raccoons, and they put them in the same family. Then other scientists observed the diet and habitat of the red panda. They eat the same food as the giant pandas. They live in the same place, and they place them together in one family. However, recent studies comparing the DNA sequences have led scientists to classify the red pandas separately as the only living species on their own, of their own family. So the more we advance our scientific knowledge and develop new technologies for understanding science, the more precise we are, we improve the precision of our observational data. So should red pandas be grouped with raccoons or with the giant pandas? They previously were, but no longer so, based on DNA technology information, which is more reliable. So explain why comparisons of DNA sequences are considered observational and non-experimental data. So again, answer this checkpoint question. So the difference between observational and non-experimental data. The process of science, as you probably guessed already, is repetitive. You have to support a particular hypothesis with a large body of evidence, which means several people have to repeat it. It's non-linear and it's collaborative. So this is one where truly more heads are better than. So forming and testing hypotheses constitute the core of science. So, and this endeavor can be influenced by the three spheres of exploration and discovery, analysis, and feedback from the scientific community, societal benefits, and outcomes. So these are the three spheres. This is the hypothesis forming the core of the scientific study. Once you made an observation and formulate an hypothesis, you make predictions and you want to perform experiments or conduct observations, explorations to test that hypothesis. Your exploration and discoveries becomes data, information, quantitative and qualitative data that you can feed back to determine whether or not you need to retest your hypothesis in a different way. Information from your exploration and discovery, typically scientists share with scientific community, attending scientific meetings, publishing in scientific journals. So you give a feedback to the scientific community and the scientific community gives feedback back to the author. And based on the information from the larger scientific community, the hypothesis is also tested by more and more people, and there's a feedback between the hypothesis. The original hypothesis is now being considered by a larger body of scientists. The scientists feed the results, the outcomes to the society for benefits of the society. For example, currently, scientists are testing whether people that have survived the COVID-19 have antibodies in their bodies that can protect other people. So once the hypothesis was formulated, those antibodies will be obtained from the blood of individuals that were previously infected and will be injected into people that have not been exposed to the virus and people that have been exposed to the virus. For people that have been exposed, is it going to reduce the incidence of the illness, or is it going to for people that have not been, once they receive these antibodies, will it be impossible for the virus to infect them? Once the data is obtained, it will be published in scientific journals and presented to scientific communities for feedback, verbal feedbacks, back and forth will go on during symposia, during conferences and meetings. Written feedback will come from publications in journals. Other scientists will repeat the same experiment, test the same hypothesis in different ways than the original scientists. And there will be that feedback between the hypothesis and the scientific community and the society at large. So we have that going on, and process that is non-linear, that is multidisciplinary, that is going on amongst the scientists, among scientists and the larger community, helping to test the hypothesis. So why is hypothesis testing at the center of the process of science? Again, make one list of your collection of checkpoint questions. There will be 14 of them for chapter 1, and email the answers. So, because science brings new information that leads to development of technology that can benefit society, there is that's interrelationship between biology, technology, and the society. These are important connections. So the goal of science itself is to study and understand the natural phenomena, the natural world. As we do this, however, it gives scientific information that leads to the development of technologies. Technology developed will be applied to solve different problems in the community. So technology is applying scientific knowledge to some specific purposes. These two fields of science and technology are interdependent. They are different, but they are interdependent. Once technology has been advanced, it can be applied to scientific research. And then scientific research and the outcome of research benefits from this new technology, and technology benefits from scientific research, and so on and so forth. So for example, because of scientific research into molecular biology, we are able to sequence this virus. So we have the RT-PCR machine that is now being used to identify the COVID-19 virus. So that is the new technology based on nucleotide sequences. Finally, we look at the 5 unifying themes in biology. Evolution is the core theme of biology. Life is ever changing and evolving. Life is distinguished by its unity and its diversity. And the factor that is responsible for the unity of life as well as its diversity is all linked to evolution. So the scientific explanation for the unity and diversity is evolution. Evolution is the process of change that has transformed life on Earth from its earliest forms to the vast arrays of living organisms that we have today. In order for living organisms to survive in their environment, they must evolve new adaptive features that helps them to survive sudden changes in their environment in which they live. So all these three, the ruby-throated hummingbird, the gentoo penguin, and the American flamingo are birds, but look how uniquely different they look. They all have beaks, but look at the long, thin beak. Look at this little brother beak, and look at these wide beaks. And different colors distinguish them. This guy is adapting to his environment, black and white, and so on and so so forth. So got the colors. So there's so many things have evolved so that these are no longer the same species. They still are unified because they're all birds, but they are all different, diverse, as they have over time tried to adapt to their various surrounding environments for survival. So Charles Darwin is known as a father of evolution, the core theme of biology. As a young man, young biologist, he had traveled on the HMS Beagle around the world, and he made collections and observations of the natural world everywhere, and with particular emphasis on the Galapagos Island. His observations include heritable variations, so the traits that have been newly acquired by an organism to enable it to survive is passed down to the offspring. He also observed that overproduction of offspring causes the pressure of the offsprings having to compete and survive, and then it's only the ones that survive that will give rise to future offsprings. His conclusion was that concept of natural selection. So Darwin synthesized the theory of evolution by natural selection. So the nature selects who is going to go to the next generation. The factors that he considered or observed and considered on equal reproductive success, that unequal reproductive success leads to evolution of adaptations in populations. So as they compete, trying to survive, some will survive, some will not. Only the ones that are actually able to compete successfully, survive, and reproduce and make future generations will evolve and survive in that environment. So in a lab hands experiment, you can test. So this population of insects going from white to gray to dark can be placed on a black cardboard or black cloth. And if you bring a bird that's going to be a predator, it can see the white lighter color easily, and those will be picked up or preyed upon or gobbled up and eliminated. So the elimination of individuals with certain traits means that those individuals will not have reproductive success because they will not have a chance at reproduction. And only the survivors will reproduce. And so because all of the light colored are being eliminated, there's increasing frequency of the dark colored insects. And these ones that are alive will give rise to the future generations. And so you have gradual eradication of these traits because of the elimination of individuals with those particular traits. So each species on Earth today has a family history. So a species is only representative of one twig on this branching tree of life that extends back in time through ancestral species and that become increasingly remote, more remote, and more remote. So for the red panda, you can see it's in its own family, Peluridae, and it recently diverged from the weasels, otters, and raccoons. Further years previously, it had a common ancestor also with the giant pandas. but that's so many generations removed. So, point question, explain the cause and effect on equal reproductive success. Again, remember to email the checkpoint questions and your answers to these checkpoint questions to me. So Charles Darwin visited the Galapagos Island. Galapagos is a Spanish word for turtle. So one of the main inhabitants of these islands are the giant turtles. These giant turtles could weigh as much as 3 fully grown humans, and with their shells could be meters, could be over a meter wide, and they have long necks. So they are, I'm trying to describe their features because the videos here do not give an indication of their size. So this is an overview of the island itself, the Galapagos Island, which is separated from the mainland. So Darwin found species of organisms that are closely related to the mainland species on the island, but on the island, they look very, very different from those that he found on land. So this is a big marine iguana. They have fewer competitors on the island, and so a lot of the organisms, they have vegetation, limited places to move, and they've been able to grow to giant sizes on the island compared to the mainland. So look at all of this marine iguana. They are different from the iguanas that you will find in the tropical rainforest of the Central America. But he believed even then that they have a common ancestor, but because they were separate, they've been separated in time and space in order to survive in these islands. The marine iguanas swimming in the water have developed features that distinguish them from the iguanas in the tropical rainforest. The sea lands in the Galapagos. The tortoises. So these are very, very big. I don't have a way to show the scale using this picture. I might email you a video that actually shows just how big. And then going from one island to another, he actually found features and characteristics so that the tortoises that live in the island where they have to lift their neck to reach up and get their food actually have longer necks, and their shells are more open towards the front than you have in the back. So some of these are huge. And so in reproductive success, he compared the blue-footed boobies. They have a courtship ritual that enables them to find mates, and only the ones that are able to find mates will successfully reproduce the next generation. And the blue foot is displayed by the boobies during the courtship rituals. And if they're attracted to a mate, then they stay with that mate and they produce and their offspring together. So it's showing off his Bluetooth, blue foot, trying to attract. So the bird that doesn't find a mate is not going to be able to give a future generation. The traits in that bird is going to disappear as they begin to age. Albatrosses, you also observe the courtship ritual. In albatrosses, they raise their neck, make sounds, so that over time they recognize each other's sound, and they would go after the sounds of their mates that's closest to them. So again, during the courtship rituals, they learn to recognize each other. If they ever wander so far away, they can still call out and they will only respond to the sound of their mate. So, but they take a long time going through the courtship rituals to recognize and accept one another. All of these are very important in reproductive success. So the albatrosses that are not able to find a mate, that's their end. They will not be able to produce offspring. So the reproductive success will be zero for those ones. So evolution is connected to our everyday life. So evolutionary theory is useful in medicine, in conservation, in agriculture. For example, over the last 1,000 years or so, scientists have done selective breeding of plants and animals. So when humans breed plants and animals, we act as agents of evolution. So when you are going walking in the field and you are looking at members of a particular plant, and then you go to the garden store and you see them, they are huge. They look different. You have plants that are bred to give different colors these days. You have plants that are bred to have pesticides and so on. So this human breeding process is a kind of artificial selection. So, and as a result of this artificial selection, our crops, livestock, and pets, they don't look like their ancestors, like their wild ancestors anymore, because we have bred into characteristics and traits that we desire. Check question, explain how humans are agents of both artificial selection and natural selection. So another one of the 5 themes of life is that life depends on the flow of information. Very, very important. The process of life depends on the transmission and use of information. The repository of information in cells is in the DNA molecule deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA deoxyribonucleic acid is responsible for the hereditary and for programming the activities of the cell. They provide the blueprint for making proteins. Proteins are the structural and functional parts of the body. And that the making of those proteins is dictated by the DNA molecule. So sometimes referred to as the molecule of life. So information from the external and internal environments, they include stimuli, signals, and metabolic pathways that regulate the body processes and gene expression. So all of this involves storage, transmission, use and processing of information. So life depends on that flow of information. Information is flowing from the external environment when a stimulus comes to a cell or an organism. There is signal transduction inside the cell when there is a virus that comes into the body, and then the body signals this first cell that is infected warns the rest of the body that we have a virus in our system, and so on and so forth. So this is the DNA molecule. It's a double helix structure. It's a nucleotide made of sugar, phosphate, and nitrogenous bases. 4 types of nucleotides are the building blocks for DNA. So adenosine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, all of these. Adenine is the nitrogenous base to the sugar phosphate, thymine nitrogenous base to the sugar phosphate, cytosine nitrogenous base to the sugar phosphate, guanine nitrogenous base to the sugar phosphate. And the DNA molecule, they pair up always following the base pair rules, adenine to thymine, guanine to cytosine, these two forming triple hydrogen bonds, these two forming double bonds. And once those bonds are formed with the nitrogenous bases, the DNA strands wound around each other in an helical structure. And that's why its structure is sometimes described as the alpha helix. So in this sugar phosphate sequence actually they are letters that have meaning and can be read just like the words that you formulate with the letters of the alphabet. So the portions of the DNA strand represent genes that can be transcribed to result in the making of a particular protein. So the information is stored in the DNA molecule. That information flows into messenger RNA molecule during transcription. So the DNA molecule is a molecule of life. One of the reasons it is because it can actually self-replicate. It can replicate portions of itself. So when it needs the body to make a particular protein, it activates a gene to make a messenger RNA. The nucleus leaves in its place. The messenger RNA goes out into the cytoplasm, carrying the information, the set of instructions that it has copied from the DNA into the cytoplasm. Inside the cytoplasm of the cell are little cellular machines called ribosomes. So the ribosomes read through the messenger RNA thread and translates that information to amino acid sequence, translates that information to protein. So you see how that information flows from DNA to mRNA to the ribosomes and leads to the manufacturing of protein. So different parts of the DNA strand can be responsible for making different proteins. Gene X is going to be responsible for making protein X, gene Y responsible for making protein Y. So in our bodies, we have, we've just finished eating, so the digestive system is processing food. Now the sugar from the food is going to the blood. So there's a signal that says, oh, there's a high blood glucose level in the body. And the pancreatic cells get the signal and they begin to make insulin. They release insulin, then insulin begins to bind insulin begins to bind the sugar. Insulin binding then stimulates the body cells to take up the glucose. And they keep taking up the glucose until the body reaches the normal blood glucose level and the signal is removed, insulin release is stopped, and the cell is working. So signal transduction takes place in the body. If there's another set of signals that will go on, if the blood has low levels of glucose, all of the glucose that was previously picked up and stored as glycogen can be, with the help of glucagon, returned into the blood. So the checkpoint question, remember to answer all of the checkpoint questions and email to me. How is signaling information involved in the expression of genetic information? Theme, structure and function are related. So in all of life, structure and function are very related. So a lot of the tools that we make in life, I actually believe that we pick up from our knowledge of what goes on in nature. If you want to so if you want to take a tack pin and press it, you would have your thumb and you can press it in there. we have our digits, we have the thumb facing all the other digits so that we can hold and grab onto things. So there's relationship between structure and function. And we observe this at every level of life. Fish, they have their fins so that they can swim. At the molecular level, the structure of a protein correlates with its function as well. For example, we have hemoglobin molecules in the blood. They have a unique shape so that they can help to transport oxygen in the blood. So they form the hemoglobin and they can carry it out. At the cellular level, we saw the nerve cells picture earlier on. They have all these long extensions of axons and dendrites that enable them to transmit impulses from the spinal cord to our toes. So we have this bug, this ladybug have its shell cuticle to protect it from the environment. These plants likewise have another cuticle layer covering its leaves to prevent pathogens from going in and making it sick. We already described the radial sesamoid bone, the false thumb of the Alerus fulgens. So the hawk is able to soar quietly, and it would already catch its prey before the prey knows that it's behind it, trying to get it. And those are adaptations that have helped for the survival. So it can be successful at getting its food. So look, it's so aerodynamic. So checkpoint question, again, remember to compile and email them to me. Look at the structure of your hand and explain how its structure supports its function. Theme number 4, life depends on the transfer and transformation of energy and matter. So in our ecosystem, the main source of energy in our ecosystem is sun. So the flow is unidirectional. It flows in one direction. Energy from the sunlight enters from the sun enters as sunlight. Inside the body of producers or autotrophs, they are converted to chemical energy. The energy is used to join carbon dioxide and water together to form glucose molecules. Those glucose molecules can either be left alone or further compounded to form disaccharides and more complex compounds. And they can be passed as food to consumers that feed on those plants, or consumers that are secondary consumers that feed on animals that first fed on the producers. As the organisms use the energy from food that was made originally by the sunlight, either by eating producers or they are producers that make convert the energies themselves. They use the energy to do work. As they use the energy to do biological work for survival, to support their cells and their bodies, some of that energy is released to the environment as heat. In addition to the transformation of energy, there's cycling of matter. So from the atmosphere and from the soil, we absorb matter. Carbon dioxide, for example, comes from the atmosphere. Water comes from the soil. We use in photosynthesis carbon dioxide and water, but there's also other things like minerals that the plants pick up to support its building and the functioning and survival of its body. Through the producers, consumers, and decomposers, the matter would flow, and then it goes back to the environment. So this is showing both the cycling of matter and the flow of energy. This arrow on top going from yellow to orange to red shows the flow of energy. These blue circles around shows the cycling of matter. The main source of energy in our planet is the sun. So sunlight energy flows into the system through photosynthetic autotrophs, the producers. So they are called autotrophs because they can automatically just stay in one place and make their food without lifting a finger. They are called producers because by making their own food, they produce enough food to feed the other organisms that cannot make their own food. So the producers, they take carbon dioxide and water and take the energy of the sun and use it to bind the molecules together, the atoms of those molecules together. In so doing, they lock the energy of the sun in chemical bonds. So that energy goes from being physical sunlight energy into chemical energy in the food. Consumers come to graze on the plants and they use that energy, the chemical energy, through the process of cellular respiration. They convert it to actual energy, maybe kinetic energy of motion to move from one place to another. And as they do, every time that we are moving and doing things, there is energy that is being lost as heat into the environment. So the leaves of plants take up carbon dioxide from the air. The roots absorb water and minerals from the soil, and they produce food. On the leaves of plants are little pores or holes called stomata. That's where the carbon dioxide goes in through. Consumers feed on the product from the producers, and when the consumers, there are different levels of consumers, but when consumers eventually die, their bodies are decomposed by worms, fungi, and bacteria under the soil, under the earth. And as the worms, fungi, and bacteria feed on the dead body of decomposers, dead bodies of consumers and producers, they decompose them and they break them into pieces, they tear up over time, and all of the elements that were built into them, the molecular elements, return to the earth. So that is the cycling of matter. Describe how photosynthesis transforms energy and matter. So that's your checkpoint question 13. I think this is the final unifying theme in biology. Life depends on interactions within and between systems. The study of life extends from microscopic scale of the molecules and cells that make up an organism to the global scale of the living planet. So we saw when we look at 10 levels within the hierarchy of life. As we go in ascending order from the atoms, molecules to organelles, to cell, to tissue, to organs, to organ systems, to organisms, to populations, to communities, to ecosystems, and to the biosphere, we have emergent properties that result as a result of the interactions between the components of a given system. So biologists now use an approach called systems biology to model the behavior of biological systems through analyzing their interactions among their different parts. So for the long time, scientists will take isolated parts of biology, but systems biology tries to look at the whole and the interactions. So it's highly among the different parts of that system. So checkpoint question 14, a box of bicycle parts won't do anything. But if the parts are properly assembled, you can take a ride. What does this illustrate? So look at this sloth. It's living in its environment, illustrating adaptation to the environment. There's a green algae growing on its coat, making it difficult to be identified in its environment of this brown tree and green leaves. So that helps it. So it's really adapted to its environment. So in the upon completion of this lecture, you should be able to describe 7 properties common to all life, compare the 3 domains of life, describe the levels of biological organization from molecules to the biosphere, noting the interrelationships between the levels. You'll be able to describe the concept of emergent properties, define science, distinguish between a hypothesis and a scientific theory, and describe the structure of a controlled experiment. You should be able to explain how hypotheses can be used to test observational data, explain how science is repetitive, non-linear, and collaborative, describe the relationship between science and technology, be able to describe the process and products of natural selection, and explain how evolution impacts the lives of all human beings. Finally, you should be able to explain how DNA determines an organism's structure and function, be able to describe the relationship between structure and function in biology. I have my nose so I can breathe. If it was plugged, or if there would be no life. So every structure has a function. Compare the dynamics of nutrients and energy in an ecosystem, and explain how systems biology is used to understand biological systems. And that concludes this chapter. And thank you so much.